All right, Eric, thanks for joining us, man. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming. Eric, you've been in the news a lot, and your transition to becoming district attorney wasn't like a normal one. It wasn't like I'm running and like I won. Sure. So tell me a little bit about like how, for people that don't know how that came about, and how does it feel when you hear the first Latino district attorney? Being that it's 2019, I think I'm like, oh, it's like that should have already happened.
Right. So I worked in the DA's office for a long time, and in 2013, Ken Thompson, who ultimately won that election, ran against Joe Hines, who was a long-term serving DA, served 24 years. When Ken Thompson won, he asked me to serve as chief assistant district attorney, which meant I was in charge of the office. I was his number 2 person in the office, and I was in charge of virtually every aspect of the district attorney's office. And I was the first Latino chief assistant DA in Brooklyn's history. He got sick, he passed away. Before he passed away, he asked me to run for district attorney. I mulled it over with my family because I never expected to run. I never expected to be involved in electoral politics. Yeah. But I really knew that office, and I really had a vision for what we needed in Brooklyn in terms of public safety and criminal justice reform. And so I ran, and the people of Brooklyn elected me in November of 2017.
And for the people that don't know what you were doing before, can you explain like what your role was and what you're doing now? Like, what does a district attorney actually do?
Well, we're in charge, the DAs are in charge of everything that happens in our courthouses. I have in my office, we're the 3rd or 4th largest DA's office in the country. I have nearly 1,200 employees, 530 assistant district attorneys. Our average caseload, year after year is about 100,000 arrests that come through. When the police make an arrest, the DA gets involved and figures out what charges, figures out whether or not they were going to proceed with the case. The DAs have a tremendous amount of authority over what happens to a person's life when they're arrested and get charged with a case, including whether or not bail is set on them, what kind of plea offer is made. So for many, many years before I was elected the DA, I was an assistant DA trying, all types of cases. I tried sex crimes cases and domestic violence cases, homicides, and like I said, when Ken Thompson won, he asked me to take the mantle of chief assistant DA, meaning that I was in charge of all the office programming. Ken created a conviction review unit, and I was involved in doing that work for him. And we started to change. He was among the first progressive elected district attorneys in the country. So DAs, wield tremendous power in our criminal justice system. And what I found, having been a DA for a long time, is that DAs often thought that their job was to punish people who committed crimes. Mm-hmm. And I think that part of the progressive movement in the district attorney's office is realizing that a DA's job is so much more valuable and important than simply punishing people who commit crimes. Yep. And so, that's what made me run for DA.
And you mentioned, I feel like in an interview where you felt like you shouldn't be making the decisions, specifically communities should be making the decisions on what should happen to somebody. Right. Why do you say that?
So I've launched a program called Justice 2020. It's a bold initiative, and it's an action plan for me in Brooklyn. There's 70 members of the launch committee. These are the biggest thinkers in criminal justice issues. So we have academics, and we have reformers, we have law enforcement, the police department, we have researchers, we also have clergy and stakeholders in our community, formerly incarcerated people, and prosecutors. And we said if we were going to reimagine our criminal justice system, a system that was meant to keep the community safe, but also to promote community trust and public trust in our justice system. What would we do differently? And what Justice 2020 came out with, it came out with 17 recommendations that say, DA, please do these 17 things. If you do it, our community will be safe, but we'll also have more trust. And one of the recommendations is, as the district attorney, is to reinvest in our community and to have the values of our communities part of what is reflected in our criminal justice system. Too often, police department or DAs decide what the policy is and implement the policy, and whether or not the community agrees with it or doesn't agree with it. We had that issue here in New York City with broken windows and stop and frisk. The police department had a strategy to reduce crime. That meant that a lot of people got searched illegally at some points, and there were hundreds of thousands of people stopped each and every year and frisked for weapons. Only a very small percentage of those people were ever found with anything illegal, contraband, weapons, and it undermined public trust. So as the DA, I've said that I'm committed to working with our community to figure out what safety actually mean to the community and what's fairness and justice look like. What policies should we be implementing? And I think very dramatically on the outcomes of cases, saying, do you want this person to go to jail for what they did, or do you want them to be given second opportunities to get their lives back on track? And that is something that we should be doing, because we serve the communities.
So, okay, they're not going to jail, so then what would be the other option?
Well, there's so many things we can do. The overwhelming majority of the cases my office handles, in the past, there may have been a knee-jerk reaction. They did something wrong, we are going to send them to prison. And we overly relied on prison.
I feel like that's the easy thing to do, just to send them away.
Right, well, and in the 70s, we had, 350,000 people in jail in the United States. Today, we have 2.2 million people in jail and prisons across the country because we've over-criminalized a lot of conduct. We're working in Brooklyn, and Justice 2020 is a bold step to say we should not send someone to prison unless they actually need to be there. Yeah. It should not be there just to pacify people who want to punish someone for making a mistake or committing a crime. Here's the truth about prison. When we send someone to jail or prison, and we don't do anything to address their underlying needs, whether it be mental health, drug addiction, anger management, they come home, and they come home usually sooner than people realize. They come home a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now. And when they come home, they don't come home and they're safer. They come home more angry, with less opportunities for employment, less opportunities to further their education. And one of the biggest impacts prison has on people is that we break them apart from their families and social connections. Many of our returning citizens come home to homelessness. But the three things that we know as law enforcement to keep people from committing crimes, the number one thing is a sense of strong social connection to somebody, whether it's a wife or a family, or just even like a meaningful part of being in the community, and then education and employment. So the three things that we know prevent people from committing crimes, we take all three of those things away from people when we send them to jail. When they go to jail, especially our young people, instead of making the social connections that are meaningful, when we go to college, we meet other young people who are similarly minded, who want to achieve, who want to do greatness in their life. When we send people to prison at an early age, they make the social connections of other younger people and older people who are criminally minded, and they come back worse, not better. So when we want to send someone to prison, we have to know that prison is needed for public safety because we believe this person is going to hurt us otherwise. And I think finally we have to push back that the only way to keep us safe is by sending someone to jail.
Yeah.
There are a lot of community-based organizations, and I think this is what we're talking about, that would be happy to take a person from their own community who has a health issue, a drug addiction issue, and say, let us keep them in the community, let us work with them, let us get them back on track. Well, the only thing we need from you, meaning the government, is the resources to do the work.